Analysis of Emily Dickinson's poems Because I Could Not Stop for Death and I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. Common themes in Dickinson's poetry. Emily Dickinson, one of the greatest American poets, wrote approximately 1,800 poems, most of which were published after her death. Some of the common themes she wrote about include nature, the individual human's relationship with God, questioning of orthodox traditional Christianity, such as in the poem Some Keep the Sabbath Going to Church, riddles, such as in the poem A Narrow Fellow in the Grass, portrayal of human emotion, such as in the poem There's a Certain Slant of Light about depression, and in the poem Wild Nights, about ecstasy, words of wisdom, such as in the poem Tell all the Truth but Tell It Slant, and different suggestions about what happens to one in death. The poems Because I Could Not Stop for Death and I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died offer very different interpretations of what might happen when one dies. Dickinson's poems are typically short and are divided into quatrains, or four-line stanzas, in which the last syllable of the second and fourth lines in each quatrain rhyme, or almost rhyme. Her poems were not given titles, so are often referred to by a number or by the first line of each poem. Form of Dickinson's poetry. Dickinson's poems typically use 7-beat lines using the meter of nursery rhymes, ballads, and church hymns, but then uses various techniques to break the typical rules of traditional poetry. She uses the first person or pronoun I, and often breaks the traditional rules of grammar with various capitalization and lots of dashes. She also is known for her use of slant or off rhyme and enjambment, or the syntactical technique of running past the conventional stopping place of a line or stanza break. Rhythm of Because I Could Not Stop for Death. The poem Because I Could Not Stop for Death has a rhythm that flows smoothly like a carriage ride through the country. Listen to the first few lines of this poem and how they flow effortlessly off the tongue. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. This simple rhythm sounds like what is happening in the poem, a carriage ride in which the driver, the personification of death, is a carriage driver taking the speaker for a ride in his carriage. Interpretation of death in Because I Could Not Stop for Death. In Because I Could Not Stop for Death, death, personified as a carriage driver, is not a threatening figure. He is described as a polite gentleman who kindly stopped for the narrator and slowly drove, for he knew no haste. He is also said to possess civility. The poem suggests life after death, since the deceased narrator is portrayed as taking a pleasant ride through the country with death after she has died. She views her life, which is merely hinted at when they are passing her childhood, school, and playtime, and her later life as fields of gazing grain, and finally her own death as the setting sun. Life after death is non-threatening because time is elusive, as the narrator realizes it has been centuries before she first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. In other words, centuries pass, shown in that her grave that is described as a swelling of the ground and the roof of her gravestone is scarcely visible, before the narrator is even aware that she has died. Rhythm of I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. The poem I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died does not flow as smoothly as Because I Could Not Stop for Death. Listen to the more abrupt sound of the first stanza of I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The more abrupt rhythm of this poem parallel its more disturbing interpretation of what happens after death. Interpretation of death in I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died depicts life as ending with death and suggests decay and loneliness after death, as if one simply dies and rots in the ground after death. The author sets the disturbing tone of this poem in the first line by mentioning a fly buzzing, an unpleasant insect that most associate with death and decay. Although the narrator is surrounded by loved ones in death, the lines, "The eyes around had wrung them dry, suggests that they have already stopped crying before the person even dies, as she has already willed her keepsakes and signed away what portion of herself that is assignable. Then she is left alone with a fly, which she observes as her senses fail, shown by the stumbling buzz, and then the windows failed, and then she could not see to see. In this frightening depiction of the moment of death, the person dying describes losing her senses and being left alone with a fly before losing her ability to see. There are a few different interpretations of who the king, whom the loved ones are waiting to witness, might be. The poem suggests that everyone expects it to be God, and yet the narrator is never described as actually seeing God after death, but simply cannot see to see. Therefore, some have suggested that just the fly is king after she is dead. Clearly, this poem depicts a less comforting portrayal of death than Because I Could Not Stop for Death. The fact that her poetry depicts different possibilities of what happens in death shows that she, as with all of us, is not sure of what happens in death and is troubled by the possibilities.